What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more Savoy, as well as a very sleepy Luca back here, and we're up to the next track in the 2018 album, See the Beauty in Your Drab Hometown, and it's called January Thaw. So it speaks, at least in terms of what we often think of, a seasonal progression, though I say that because technically January is the dead of winter, and it is not typically, if you live in a zone where things become frigid and frozen, it's not usually when things are thawing out. That's a couple months later by the time you get to March, and even that is only in the northern hemisphere. But of course, in terms of cultural seasonal progression, we tend to think of December as related to Christmas time and snowy fields, white Christmases, indeed. So the idea of things thawing in January could suggest that as you reach the new year, a shift away from colder temperatures and frigid environments toward greener pastures and a warming, indeed a thawing, is something that takes place. But as I said, typically, or in climates where this is actually a progression that takes place, it's usually later than that. Even February, I think, is still in the dead of winter in a lot of places. So, yeah, the use of January, other than it being the beginning of a new calendar year, which can be seen as about renewal, restoration, the end of winter, ultimately, I'm curious about the designation of January. Nevertheless, thawing, unfreezing, becoming filled with heat and therefore potentially life or motion. So I feel like there's a lot of figurative or metaphorical possibilities on offer. We'll see what Paul and the rest have to say about it. This is Savoy. The track is January Thaw, and it's on their 2018 album See the Beauty in Your Drab Hometown.
See the beauty in your drab hometown.
We have an album title.
Seek the beauty when it's hiding underground, lost and can't be found. Conformity abound. Never an option to move to away. To sit on a hilltop and soak hot sun rays.
January thaw.
January thaw.
Everything is different from before. January thaw.
January thaw.
Must have been the strangest thing I saw.
Ooh, I like that. I like this driving drum rhythm. It has a 4-to-the-floor dance type of beat, but it sounds natural drums, not drum machine.
See the beauty in your drab hometown. Seek the beauty when it's hidden underground, lost and can't be found. An urban battleground. Never an option to move to the coast, to gaze down a wide palm line road through eyes of a ghost.
January thaw.
January thaw.
Everything is different from before.
That's a cool tune. So a few things stand out sonically. Excuse me. Number one is the voice that repeats the phrase January Thaw. That's not Paul, is it? I apologize. Graham gave me a picture of the credits for the album, but I didn't remember to look in advance of this tune. But the male vocal in the verses, that sounds like Paul very clearly. Then we get Lauren coming in with her like higher / younger type voice. And then that very sonorous follow-up of the title phrase feels like that's maybe a different male voice. So correct me if I'm wrong there, and no offense to Paul if it actually is him just adjusting his delivery. Nevertheless, the alternation of voices I enjoy, and it does sound like on some level we're talking about a new year, a renewal, a chance to see things underneath their current covering or underneath the snowy ground as for what they actually are. But also we're talking about prospective situations which feel much more spring or summer, catching rays on a hillside or looking out at a coast. What was it? There was like a line in between, then it was something like looking like a ghost, or I forget exactly what the sequence of lines was. But yeah, so it does sound like we're talking about seasonal change, and perhaps that not in a literal sense, but representative of, again, seeing things underneath their coverings or the things that obscure them for what they actually really are and can be. But ultimately, I like the resonant, electronic sounding chime melody. Again, it almost sounded like an electronic bell, almost like a chiptune type of sound, but with a slightly more advanced configuration, if you will. But yes, I like that. I like the overall smooth flavor of the tune. Less, I would say, alternative rock sounding, but also with a natural instrument feel and a lot of the elements. Again, I mentioned the kick drum driving away with that 4/4 beat, and even a bass line alternating with it like a techno or trance track, but sounding more natural bass, natural drums, a bass line from an actual bass guitar. So it was an interesting blend of elements that I associate with electronic bass tunes with a more pop rock style, but not in some of their alternative rock configurations where I've mentioned, like, oh, this reminds me of a Garbage tune. This one didn't do that, even though it had some elements that on the surface of it you could say, okay, some electronic sounds, guitar standing out at a different point, and therefore having the ingredients that would maybe fit their more alternative rock sound, but not also in their 60s Beatles style vein. Again, this one had a couple elements that fit with, in general, tunes that I've said, oh, this sounds kind of like a throwback, like a mid-20th century track, like a 60s sing-along sort of tune. This didn't really have that flavor either, so it was sort of taking bits and pieces from their sonic stylings over the course of the albums I've heard, but then using it to make a different type of musical meal, if you will. So again, other than suggesting it sounds like we are talking about renewal, a new year, providing a thaw of the covering or frozen aspects that can then be something else more vital, more alive, more warm and inviting, I don't really know what's happening lyrically. So an interesting tune. Definitely curious to hear what people have to say about this one. Let me know, and I will see you next time. Peace.